The sun was setting over New York City, washing the streets in shades of orange and gold. People hurried past each other, lost in their own worlds, faces glued to screens, headphones in their ears, hearts far away. Amid the noise, the city didn't stop for anyone, not even for the young man lying motionless on the sidewalk. At first, no one noticed him. Cars honked, horns blared, and the crowd flowed around his still body like water around a stone. Some slowed down for a moment, glanced at his designer shoes and expensive jacket, and kept walking. In a city like this, people assumed things. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was just another spoiled kid who partied too hard. Nobody wanted to get involved. But one girl did stop. Amara Williams was 19 years old, a college sophomore juggling 2 part-time jobs just to afford her tuition. She had just finished a long shift at a coffee shop and was on her way home, carrying a worn-out backpack and half a sandwich she couldn't finish earlier. Her feet ached and her bus was minutes away. But as she walked past the alley where he lay, something in her heart told her to stop. She froze. A faint sound like a weak gasp reached her ears. She turned and saw him. A young man, maybe in his early 20s, lying on the cold concrete, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly. His expensive watch glimmered faintly in the dying sunlight. "Hey," Amara called out, taking a cautious step closer. No response. She crouched beside him, fear creeping into her chest. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. His lips were dry and his breathing was shallow, barely there. Amara's heart raced. She looked around. People passed by, glancing briefly but not stopping. Her frustration grew. "Someone help." "Please," she shouted. A man in a suit muttered, probably drunk, and walked off. A woman with shopping bags shook her head. "Poor thing," she whispered and kept going. Amara clenched her fists. "How can people just walk away?" she whispered to herself. Her hands shook as she reached into his pocket, looking for an ID or something, anything to help identify him. That's when she found his phone, cracked and dirty from the fall. The screen lit up as she pressed the button. There were several missed calls, and one contact stood out, Dad, Mr. Donovan Hart. The name made her blink. She had heard it before, on TV, on billboards, in magazines. Donovan Hart, the billionaire, real estate mogul who owned half the skyline of New York. The man who lived in a world so far from hers it might as well have been another planet. Her fingers hovered over the phone. "Should I really call him?" she thought. "Will he even believe me?" But one look at the unconscious boy made her decision. She took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice. Then a deep, stern voice answered. "Yes? Who is this?" Amara swallowed hard. "Sir, my name is Amara. I found this phone beside a young man. I think it's your son. He's unconscious on the street." There was silence, just the faint sound of breathing on the other end. "Where?" the man asked, his voice suddenly sharp and desperate. Amara gave the street name, her voice trembling. "He's not moving much. I called 911 already, but I'm on my way," Donovan said, his tone clipped, urgent, filled with a kind of panic that no billionaire could hide. The line went dead. Amara knelt beside the boy again, gently lifting his head onto her lap. "Hang in there, okay?" she whispered. "Help's coming." For a moment she looked at his face, his sharp features, his dark blonde hair, the faint bruise on his temple. There was something fragile about him, something that didn't match the arrogance people often imagined when they thought of rich kids. As she sat there, sirens began to wail in the distance. Blue and red lights reflected off the wet pavement as an ambulance turned the corner. Amara sighed in relief, her heart still pounding. She didn't know what she had just stepped into, but something told her this wasn't just another city accident. This moment, this choice to stop when everyone else walked away, was about to change everything. For her, for the unconscious boy, and for the man on the other end of that phone call. And as the paramedics rushed toward them, Amara whispered under her breath, "You're going to be okay. I promise." She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know his story. But she knew one thing. Kindness had just connected two worlds that were never meant to meet. The sound of sirens grew louder, echoing between tall glass towers. Amara stood up as the ambulance screeched to a halt beside the curb. Two paramedics rushed out, their voices brisk and professional. "What happened?" one of them asked. "I just found him here," Amara stammered. He wasn't breathing properly. They checked his pulse, lifted him onto a stretcher, and strapped an oxygen mask over his face. One of the paramedics nodded. "He's got a pulse, but it's weak. We need to move now." Amara stepped back, her hands trembling. The boy's face looked even paler under the harsh blue lights. She didn't even know his name. But she felt this strange ache inside her chest, as if she already cared. And then, suddenly, another sound joined the chaos, deep engine growls and screeching tires. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom came flying down the street, stopping so abruptly that the scent of burning rubber filled the air. The back door flung open before the car even fully stopped. Out stepped a tall man in a dark suit, his silver cufflinks flashing under the streetlights. His hair was streaked with grey, his expression a mixture of fury and fear. It was Donovan Hart, the billionaire himself. People nearby started whispering, pulling out phones, recognizing him immediately. But Donovan didn't care about the crowd, the cameras, or his image. His only focus was the boy on the stretcher. He rushed forward, voice cracking as he shouted, "Ethan! Ethan, can you hear me?" The paramedics held him back gently. "Sir, please, we need space to work." Donovan's voice trembled. "He's my son." Amara's breath caught. Ethan, that was his name. Donovan turned to her suddenly, his eyes sharp, filled with desperate confusion. Were you the one who called me?" Amara swallowed. "Yes, sir. I found him lying there." He wasn't responding, so Before she could finish, Donovan gripped her shoulders. "Thank you. Thank you for calling." His tone was fierce, but beneath it was a tremor of fear and gratitude. "If you hadn't, I might have never known." The ambulance doors opened, and the paramedics began pushing Ethan inside. "We're taking him to St. Mark's Hospital," one of them said. "I'm coming with you," Donovan replied without hesitation. Then he looked at Amara again. "You come too?" Amara blinked, confused. "Me?" "Yes, you found him first. You might know something I don't." Before she could argue, the billionaire gestured to his driver. "Follow us." Amara hesitated only for a second, then climbed into the ambulance. The doors shut behind her with a heavy thud, sealing her inside a world she didn't belong to. A world of flashing lights, oxygen masks and whispered prayers. As the siren wailed and the vehicle sped through traffic, Amara watched Ethan's chest rise and fall under the oxygen mask. His hand twitched once, his face still pale. She could feel the tension radiating from Donovan as he sat beside her, gripping his son's arm, his usually composed face breaking apart with every second. For a man who built skyscrapers, who controlled empires, this was something he couldn't control, and that terrified him. Amara could hear him murmuring under his breath, almost to himself. "Why were you here? Why weren't you home? What happened to you, son?" She wanted to say something to comfort him, but what could she say? She was just a stranger who had stumbled into his world by accident. Still, she found her voice. "He's strong. He'll make it." Donovan looked at her. For a moment, the billionaire mask slipped away, and she saw something raw, human behind his eyes. "I hope you're right," he said softly. The ambulance turned sharply and stopped. The hospital lights glared ahead like a beacon. Doctors and nurses rushed forward as soon as the doors opened. Male, early 20s, found unconscious, weak pulse. "Possible overdose or exhaustion," one of the medics called out. They wheeled Ethan away, his hand slipping from Donovan's grasp. "Ethan!" the billionaire shouted, but the doctors had already taken him into the emergency room. The doors closed, leaving Donovan standing in the hallway, breathing hard, his world suddenly smaller than it had ever been. Amara stood quietly at a distance. She didn't know if she should leave or stay. She had done her part, hadn't she? But something inside told her not to walk away just yet. Then Donovan turned to her again, his voice heavy but calm. "Stay, please, until I know he's safe." Amara nodded slowly. "Okay." He sank onto one of the hospital benches, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. Amara sat a few seats away, listening to the quiet hum of machines, the distant announcements, the sound of a man's heart breaking in silence. And as she looked at him, the billionaire who everyone thought had Everything, she realized the truth. Money can buy many things, but not the heartbeat of someone you love. For the first time in her life, Amara saw the most powerful man in New York, not as a tycoon, but as a father terrified of losing his son. And in that sterile white hallway, two strangers sat side by side, one rich, one poor, bound together by fear, hope, and a single phone call that had changed everything. The hospital clock ticked softly, marking each second that passed like a drop of water echoing in a cave. Donovan sat in the waiting area, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. For the first time in years, his world wasn't defined by numbers, contracts, or luxury. It was defined by fear. Amara sat a few seats away, watching quietly. Around them, nurses rushed, monitors beeped, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Yet despite the chaos, everything felt strangely still, like time itself was holding its breath. After what felt like hours, a doctor in a white coat approached. He was calm, but his face was serious. "Mr. Hart?" Donovan stood up immediately. "Yes, my son, how is he?" The doctor sighed softly. "He's stable for now, but he's been under extreme stress both physically and emotionally. We found traces of alcohol and sleeping pills in his system. It's possible he tried to harm himself, or maybe he was just trying to escape something painful." Donovan's face froze. "No," he whispered. "Not Ethan, he couldn't." The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder. "He's conscious now, but weak. You can see him, just go easy on him, sir. He's been through a lot." Donovan nodded numbly and walked toward the hospital room, his heart pounding. Amara followed quietly, unsure if she should go but unable to leave. When they entered, the sight broke Donovan's heart. Ethan lay in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, with IV tubes running into his arm. His once sharp eyes were half open, filled with exhaustion. "Ethan," Donovan said softly, stepping closer. Ethan's eyes flickered toward him. For a long moment, silence hung between them, thick, painful, heavy. Then Ethan turned his head away. "You didn't even notice I was gone for 2 days," he said weakly, his voice hoarse. Donovan froze, the words cutting through him like glass. "That's not true," he said quickly. "I've been busy," Ethan interrupted. "You've been busy for years, Dad. Too busy to come to my graduation. Too busy to ask how I'm doing. Too busy to care." Donovan took a shaky breath, trying to steady himself. "Ethan, I've been working hard for you. For our future. For this family." Ethan laughed bitterly, though it came out more like a cough. "Family? You mean your company? The only thing you've ever loved." Amara stood near the doorway, her heart heavy. She wanted to step back, to give them privacy, but something told her that her presence somehow mattered here. Donovan sat down beside the bed, his voice trembling now. "I didn't know you were hurting like this." Ethan's gaze softened slightly, but only for a moment. "That's the problem. You never looked close enough to see it." The silence that followed was unbearable. Machines beeped softly. Outside, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Amara felt the air thicken with emotion, a mixture of guilt, anger, and years of unspoken pain. Finally, Ethan turned his head toward her. You're the girl who found me." Amara nodded. "Yes, I just saw you lying there. I couldn't walk away." He studied her face for a moment, as if trying to read something deeper. "You saved me," he said quietly. "I did what anyone should have done," she replied. Ethan gave a faint, tired smile. "Then you're the only one who did." Those words hit Donovan harder than anything else. He looked at Amara, the girl who had shown compassion when the world, and even he, hadn't. For a long moment, the billionaire said nothing. Then, with a sigh that carried years of regret, he whispered, "Thank you, Amara, for calling me, for saving him." Amara nodded gently, her eyes soft. He's lucky to have a father who came so fast. But Donovan shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "No, I should have come long before today." He stood there staring at his son, his empire. His money, his success, all of it felt meaningless compared to the fragile boy lying in that bed. In that moment, the mighty Donovan Hart didn't feel powerful. He felt small, helpless, human. And as he watched Ethan drift back to sleep, one thought burned in his mind. How many years had he spent building towers so high that he couldn't see the cracks forming? In his own home? Amara quietly stepped closer, pulling the blanket up to Ethan's chest. "He'll need you," she said softly, looking at Donovan. "Not as a billionaire, but as a father." Donovan nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "Then that's what I'll be." And for the first time in a very long time, he meant it. The days after Ethan's collapse moved slowly, like the world itself was taking a breath between storms. The hospital room had become strangely peaceful, filled with the quiet hum of machines and the faint smell of disinfectant. Outside the window, the city went on as usual, fast, noisy, heartless, but inside that room time felt different. Ethan was recovering. His color had returned, and his eyes stayed open longer now, but something inside him still seemed fragile, like a cracked mirror barely holding its reflection together. Donovan came every day. He wore no suits now, no shiny watches, no phone pressed to his ear. He just sat beside his son, hands clasped, eyes full of guilt he couldn't hide anymore. Sometimes Amara would bring flowers from the park outside. She wasn't family, but somehow the nurses treated her like she belonged there. Maybe it was because Ethan smiled more when she was around. One afternoon, as the golden light poured through the hospital blinds, Donovan entered the room carrying a small envelope. "Amara," he said, approaching her with a polite but heavy expression, "I want to thank you properly. You saved my son. Please take this." She looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "What is it?" "Money," he said simply. "A token of gratitude." Amara shook her head gently. "I can't accept that, sir." Donovan frowned. "Why not?" "It's the least I can do." "Because I didn't do it for money," she said softly, looking straight into his eyes. "I did it because no one else stopped." The words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, Donovan said nothing. His lips parted, then closed again. He slowly slipped the envelope back into his pocket. Amara smiled faintly. "Your son doesn't need money right now. He just needs you." She walked out of the room quietly, leaving him standing there speechless. When she returned later, Ethan was awake, staring out the window. His face looked calm, but his eyes carried something deeper, sadness wrapped in silence. "Hey," Amara said softly, taking the chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling today?" He gave a small, tired smile. "Better, physically. The rest, I don't know." She tilted her head. "You want to talk about it?" He hesitated, then sighed. "You know what's funny? Everyone thinks being rich means you have everything. But I've never felt emptier." Amara said nothing, letting him continue. "After Mom died, Dad stopped talking to me about anything real. He just drowned himself in work. Our house felt like a museum, quiet, perfect, lifeless. Every dinner was about business. Every morning was about deals. I tried to keep up. I studied business because he wanted me to, but inside I hated it." His voice cracked slightly. "I wasn't living. I was existing in his shadow." Amara's heart ached. She understood that kind of pain, being invisible in the eyes of the world. "I know what that's like," she said quietly. "Losing someone and trying to stay strong for everyone else. My mom passed when I was 15. After that, it was just me and my little sister. I had to grow up fast." Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. "That's why you helped me, isn't it? Because you know what it's like to be alone." Amara nodded. "Maybe, but I also know that pain doesn't have to define you. You can choose what to do with it." He gave a faint laugh. "You talk like someone who's been through fire." "I have," she said simply. "But fire doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it shapes you." For a long while they sat in silence, two souls who came from different worlds, yet understood each other perfectly. Just then the door opened, and Donovan walked in quietly. He paused when he saw them talking, their conversation soft but genuine. He stood at the doorway, guilt tightening in his chest. For years he had tried to buy peace, control love and measure success in profits. But watching his son smile faintly at a stranger's, kindness showed him what he had truly lost: connection. "Dad," Ethan said, noticing him, "you ever wonder what it feels like to just live without meetings, without expectations?" Donovan didn't know how to answer. "I used to," he said finally, "before I forgot what mattered." Amara looked between them. She could feel the tension, but also something new, a small crack of light breaking through years of distance. Before leaving, she turned to Donovan. Sometimes people don't need the world from you, Mr. Hart. They just need you to listen. Donovan nodded slowly, almost whispering, I'm starting to learn that. As Amara stepped into the hallway, she took a deep breath. She could feel something changing inside that hospital room, something small, but real. Maybe healing didn't happen in grand gestures or expensive gifts. Maybe it began in quiet rooms, between broken people learning how to speak again. And without realizing it, Amara had become the bridge between two hearts that had forgotten how to reach each other. The morning sunlight spilled softly through the hospital window, casting long golden streaks across the white walls. The hum of machines had become a familiar rhythm, steady, comforting. Ethan was finally strong enough to sit up, the color slowly returning to his face. Donovan sat across from him, silent. His expensive watch ticked faintly, but for once he wasn't thinking about time, money, or deals. He was thinking about words, the ones he had never said, and the ones he wished he could take back. For 2 days he had come and gone quietly. Sometimes he would bring food, sometimes just sit by the bed, lost in thought. The world outside kept calling him. Meetings, investors, and news headlines. But for the first time in decades, he let it all wait. Amara often visited in the evenings. She'd bring coffee for Donovan and magazines for Ethan. The three of them would sit in a strange, peaceful silence that didn't need to be filled. It was the silence of understanding. That afternoon, Donovan found himself standing by the window, staring out at the skyline he had built, glass towers that touched the clouds, each one bearing his name. He had always thought success meant power. But looking at his reflection in the window, he saw only a lonely man who had lost the very reason he'd started it all. Amara walked in quietly, noticing him deep in thought. "You okay, Mr. Hart?" He didn't answer right away. His voice, when it came, was quieter than she had ever heard it. "Do you know what hurts the most, Amara?" She shook her head. "I built skyscrapers to touch the sky, but I couldn't even reach my own son." Amara's eyes softened. "It's not too late," she said. "He's still here. That means there's still time." Donovan turned to her, his eyes glistening. "I don't know how to start. I've spent years building walls, around my company, around myself. I thought love meant providing everything. Turns out I gave him everything, except what he needed most." "Love doesn't start perfect," Amara said gently. "It starts with presence, just being there." Her words lingered in the air like a quiet truth. That night, Donovan did something he hadn't done in years. He turned off his phone. No business calls, no assistants, no emails. For once, the billionaire disappeared, and only the father remained. He pulled a chair closer to Ethan's bed. "Mind if I stay a while?" he asked. Ethan looked at him, surprised but touched. "Sure." For hours they just talked, not about business or school, but about memories. Childhood ones, silly ones, painful ones. Ethan told him about his mother's favorite songs, the ones she used to hum while cooking breakfast. Donovan smiled through tears he didn't bother to hide. "She always made the house feel alive," Ethan whispered. "After she was gone, everything felt cold." Donovan nodded, his voice breaking. "She was the light, Ethan. I lost her, and I guess I lost myself, too." Ethan looked down, his eyes wet. "You didn't lose yourself, Dad. You just forgot who you were." Those words hit Donovan deeper than any criticism or failure ever had. He reached for his son's hand, awkwardly at first, then firmly, like a father reclaiming something precious. "I'm sorry," Donovan said, his voice cracking, "for missing so much, for making you feel alone." Ethan squeezed his hand weakly. "I just wanted you to see me." "I do now," Donovan whispered, "and I won't stop." From that day, Donovan began changing, not with grand gestures, but in small human ways. He started spending every morning at the hospital. He brought Ethan breakfast instead of stock reports. He listened instead of talking, and every time Amara visited, she noticed how different he looked, calmer, lighter, more alive. One morning, Amara found him reading aloud from Ethan's favorite book. His deep voice stumbled over the words, but Ethan laughed, teasing him. The room, once filled with tension, now echoed with laughter, something it hadn't heard in years. Later that week, Donovan did the unthinkable. He called his company board and cancelled a billion-dollar meeting. His secretary nearly fainted. "I'm taking a week off," he said firmly. "Family comes first." It was a sentence he hadn't spoken in decades, and for the first time he meant it. He and Ethan began taking short walks around the hospital garden. Sometimes Amara joined. Sometimes she watched from a distance, smiling quietly. She could see it happening, the cracks in their hearts beginning to heal. Donovan wasn't just a billionaire anymore. He was a man learning how to love again. And through it all, Amara became the bridge that connected them, the quiet strength that had brought hope into a house made of glass and loneliness. Because sometimes, the richest hearts are the ones that finally learn what money can't buy. 3 weeks later, Ethan walked out of the hospital, weak but smiling. The sun touched his face, warm and golden, like a new beginning. Donovan stood beside him, one hand resting gently on his son's shoulder. He had come not in a limousine this time, but in a simple black sedan. No chauffeur, no crowd, just a father and son side by side. Amara waited near the entrance, her smile bright and genuine. She'd been there almost every day, bringing meals, cheering Ethan up, making both of them laugh in moments that felt too heavy. When she saw them walking toward her, her eyes softened. "You did it," she said proudly. Ethan grinned. "We did it." Donovan nodded, his gaze filled with emotion. "No, Amara, you did it. You saved my son's life." Amara shook her head humbly. "I just made a phone call. God did the rest." Donovan's voice was steady, but his eyes shimmered with unspoken gratitude. "That call was everything. Without you, I might have lost him forever." Ethan smiled faintly. "Guess angels don't always have wings." They all laughed, the kind of laughter that comes when pain finally loosens its grip on the heart. But as the laughter faded, Donovan's expression turned serious. "Amara," he said, "I want to show you something." He gestured toward his car, and they all drove through the city, past towering skyscrapers, past polished marble buildings that bore his company's name. Amara had seen this city her whole life, but never from this close. Every turn revealed another symbol of wealth. Things she'd never imagined she'd sit near, much less inside. Finally, they stopped in front of a new building, tall, modern, yet warm. It wasn't one of Donovan's usual cold corporate structures. This one had color, murals on the walls, and children's laughter echoing from within. "What is this place?" Amara asked curiously. Donovan smiled. "It's called Heart Hope Center. It's a community space for underprivileged kids, a place where they can study, dream and grow." Amara's eyes widened. "That's incredible. But why are you showing me this?" "Because it's yours," he said quietly. Her mouth fell open. "Mine? Mr. Hart, what are you talking about?" Donovan took a step closer. "You reminded me what humanity means. You saved my son's life, not just by calling for help, but by reminding him and me that kindness still exists. I built this in your name. You'll run it, guide it, and decide how it helps others." Amara was speechless. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know what to say." Ethan smiled at her gently. "Just say yes." Amara wiped her tears. "I can't take this. I didn't save your son for money or gifts." Donovan nodded. "I know. That's exactly why you deserve it." The moment was quiet, a kind of silence that carried meaning. A billionaire, his son, and a young woman who had once been invisible to the world, all standing together, bound not by wealth but by something far more powerful, compassion. As days passed, the Heart Hope Center opened its doors. The neighborhood, once forgotten, came alive again. Children from broken homes found a safe place to learn. Amara ran it with passion, mentoring the kids, teaching them self-worth and hope. Ethan often visited, helping with art projects and mentoring the teens. Donovan, once too busy for anything but business, now spent his weekends there, sitting on the floor with children, reading stories, handing out notebooks, and laughing like a man who had finally rediscovered his soul. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in orange and pink, Donovan sat on a bench watching Amara and Ethan laugh with the children. A quiet peace settled over him, the kind he'd been chasing his whole life but had never found in boardrooms or bank accounts. Ethan joined him, sitting down beside his father. "You look happy," he said softly. Donovan smiled, eyes still on the children. "For the first time in a long time, I am." Ethan followed his gaze. "You really changed, Dad." Donovan nodded slowly. "No, son. You changed me." And so did she. He looked toward Amara, who was helping a small boy tie his shoes, her laughter echoing like music. That girl, Donovan continued, taught me something money could never buy, the beauty of a grateful heart. Ethan smiled. So what now? Donovan leaned back, the wind ruffling his hair. No, we live, we love, and we never forget where we came from. As the camera of life panned out, the billionaire, his son, and the girl who changed everything, the skyline shimmered in the fading light. Not just buildings of steel and glass anymore, but symbols of second chances, because sometimes miracles don't come from heaven. They come from ordinary people who choose kindness when no one's watching. And that single act can change a billionaire, heal a son, and light up an entire world.